Hello, everyone. This is Professor Reena Randhir, and today we'll talk about food processing, preservation, packaging, and sustainability. So here is a food cycle. So when we think about sustainable principles, sustainability is essential in every step of the food cycle, from production in a farm, processing in factories, transport and distribution, even at the consumer end, and recycling. We'll talk about processing today. The main student learning outcomes is to understand the principles of food processing, additives, and packaging. We'll identify the classification of processing, some of the benefits and drawbacks. We'll discuss how it affects the environment and human health. We will also discuss some sustainable food processing and packaging principles. What is food processing and why is it important? Food processing is very important for food safety. It is the transformation of agricultural products into food by either applying chemical or physical or biological techniques. So the main goal here is to make food last longer, make it more available and safe. Food safety is prime importance, increasing the shelf life of food, sometimes to improve the nutrition of the food, taste, texture, to improve the convenience of storing it for long periods of time, the convenience of transport and consumption, to address food security, and of course, to reduce agricultural waste. And here's a picture of many ways an apple can be converted into a processed food. An apple can last maybe only a few weeks, but like if it's juiced or freeze-dried or made into a sauce or jellies and jams and pies along with some preservatives, it can last longer. What are some of the main advantages and disadvantages of food processing? Just like now I mentioned, is for food safety. It increases the food safety. It can increase the value of food, the shelf life of food, convenience, year-round availability, accessibility, reducing food waste. On the other hand, it can also cause a loss of nutritional value in food sometimes. The additives can be harmful to health. And it can also have negative impacts on the environment if it is not produced or processed in a sustainable way. Here's some data that shows, in our last lecture, we saw how about a fourth of all the green gas emissions come from the food industry, global gas emissions. The emissions from food processing depend on the type and the scale of processing and the type of transportation and packaging that was used. It is very important that we switch to renewable energy use in processing, follow efficient ways to use land and water, and source sustainable ingredients. So here you can see the supply chain contributes 18% of the greenhouse gases. This food processing and packaging. The food processing methods are canning, freezing, drying, pickling, smoking, salting, pasteurization, high pressure, and there's also like new techniques. Among all these techniques, it's fermentation that has a very efficient low carbon footprint. So if we can replace our diet, even like if it's 5% of your plate with some kind of a fermented food, it will have a global effect. There are three types of food processing, primary, secondary, and tertiary. Primary food processing is also called raw processing, is the initial stage of food production. So this is when you harvest or you extract the raw material. And this would be the foundation for the next processing steps. Some of the examples here, you can see a harvester harvesting wheat, washing the fruits, harvesting and washing the fruits and vegetables in the farm itself, gathering, cleaning, sorting, or like milking the cows are some examples. In secondary food processing, this refers to the transformation of the food material into either intermediate or the finished product. It will include activities like cooking, milling, canning, packaging. And here you can add a few other ingredients to make, a good example is making bread or cookies or cakes. Tertiary food processing is further processing and refinement. These are kind of like ready to eat foods. In this step, they will add a lot of additives, stabilizers, emulsifiers, thickeners, preservatives, food coloring. A good example would be freeze-dried fruits and vegetables, vacuum packaged fruits. Here's an example of ketchup. So these are tertiary food processing. And here's a very good summary slide that has the different food groups and primary, secondary, and tertiary processing examples. So for fruits and vegetables, the tertiary would be jams and ketchups and pickles. And for milk, it is yogurt. In meat and poultry, it's those TV dinners, ready-to-eat meals. Another classification of food processing is called NOVA, group foods, according to the extent and purpose of the processing. Here, the foods are classified as unprocessed, processed, slightly processed, processed, and ultra-processed. In unprocessed, the food does not go any processing. For examples, it is the harvested fruits and vegetables and milk and eggs. Processed, these are very slightly processed, and they are used for seasoning our foods like sugar and salt. In processed, they are minimally processed. And here is the ultra processed foods that these are the convenience foods of current times, like cookies and hot dogs and Coke and pizza. So the thing is, the more processed it is, it has more salt, more saturated fat, more sugar. It's kind of additive. So so you have to find the right balance among these food types. There's another type of foods which is called functional foods, where the food is fortified. For example, here there's a picture of a cereal that is fortified with vitamins and minerals. So this is for added health benefits. And we've always seen vitamin D fortified milk, because vitamin D helps with the absorption of calcium. Iodinized salt, that is important for thyroid health. Or energy drinks that have caffeine in them, or like protein shakes for bodybuilding. So like these are called functional foods. What are food additives? These are chemicals. Sometimes they're natural, sometimes they are synthetic. They are added to the food product to improve its taste, its flavor, its appearance, its texture, and shelf life. For example, preservatives will deter bacteria and fungi from growing. Antioxidants will stop rancidity of acids. Thickening agents or flavoring agents, stabilizers, coloring agents that can make the food very colorful. And here's some examples. Monosodium glutamate, food coloring, sunset yellow. So these are common additives in everyday foods nowadays. And this little table here shows the health concern. High fructose corn syrup is linked to, too much of it is linked to obesity, type 2 diabetes that can lead to cardiovascular disease. Sodium nitrite that is used in preserving meat, like hot dogs, can form carcinogenic compounds in the body. Sweeteners like aspartame is linked to headaches and dizziness. Monosodium glutamate, that makes Chinese food so tasty, is also linked to health problems. Food packaging. The first thing that jumps into my mind is the Great Pacific and Atlantic garbage patch. The world, there's so much plastic in the world. And single-use plastic has only recently been addressed. Packaging is vital for food safety because it's keeping the food safe, and we are preventing waste, and it's protecting the food, and it's usually made with materials like ceramics, glass, metal, aluminum, paper, cardboard, wood, etc. But these themselves use a lot of energy in their production. The energy footprint, the water footprint, they do have a lot of greenhouse gases. Environmental Protection Agency say that more than half of all the solid waste come from food waste, food packaging. So here is a nice concept map that's explaining the fate of plastics in the environment. Billions and billion tons of plastics are made that end up wasted. Only a part of it, small part of it, is incinerated, burnt. That contributes to global warming. That can enter the water supply and our dirt, our soil, and it can cause toxicity to humans. It can also put out greenhouse gases like nitrous oxide. A very small percentage of it, 14%, is recycled. Most of it ends up in the landfill, garbage bins. And it kind of, see this vicious cycle of, like, we've seen pictures of poor turtles and fishes, and they are caught in the net in the ocean. They look so helpless. And we've heard of microplastics that have entered the food chain, and now it's found even in our blood. So these are all serious things to think about. And here is a chart that shows, this is the pie chart of packaging industry. 38% is coming from food, 18% from beverages. So more than half is the food industry that is responsible for the plastic waste. So we have to shift to sustainable food packaging practices. This refers to materials and processes that has a lower impact on the environment than the traditional packing materials. For examples would be biodegradable plastics. They are made from renewable sources like cornstarch, or compostable packaging. That means this can break down naturally. Or recyclable packaging, edible packaging, reusable containers, and so forth. And this picture here is very interesting. This shows how long it will take for the different packaging to break down. And it shows that plastic can take more than 50 years, and glass is 450 years. So what are some of the sustainable food processing practices? So the main goal of sustainable practice is to reduce the environmental impact of food processing while ensuring food quality and safety. And here's some ways we can address this. We have to reduce food waste by minimizing losses and increasing the use of byproducts or waste materials. We have to reduce the carbon footprint by using renewable energy sources like solar energy, wind energy, and so forth. We have to reduce the water footprint. You can do that by actually reducing the water use and also using water efficient equipment and processes, recycling the water and reusing the water, using sustainable packaging, such as biodegradable or compostable packing materials, to source locally. This is where buy local comes, so that we can cut down on transport-related greenhouse gas emissions. And we also support the local communities. We turn to regenerative agriculture and organic ingredients that does not use pesticides and herbicides and fertilizers. Adopt sustainable farming practices. We ensure food safety with high hygiene protocol throughout the food supply chain. And of course, we can also create awareness of the pros of fermentation, because it has fermented food products that has a lower carbon footprint. So the main summary is food processing is vital to keep our food safe and to address food safety. We learned the different methods of classification and types of food processing. We briefly went over food additives and its effect on health. We talked about the food packaging crisis that has to be addressed. And the most important point is food processing and packaging sector has to be more sustainable by using a variety of innovative approaches. And I hope you learned something, and I hope it was useful.